about a system that's humane rather than to both sides, rather than setting a precedent because one individual, here has got a 30% cut on because of culture. If you were to separate the background and the experiences and all those other things away from culture, what does that leave you?
Well, and it's not that long ago that a party almost won an election on arguing, one law for all and Don Brash's reworked speech. Do you think the public get this is how the courts work, and do you think there is a comfort with this around New Zealanders? Are the courts taking New Zealanders with them if they're making these kind of decisions?
Yeah, and also, public perception sometimes is filtered through media organisations and blogs and etc. So it's. This is not the only one within the justice system, but there's some delicate cases over the years which has created both sides of the argument depending on which media outlet you follow.
And this offender is not going to benefit for 6 years or 3 years. What they actually need, it's not the length of sentence, it's the programs and the rehabilitation and the reintegration, right? So, if the victim's side of it is comfortable with that and the offender's side is comfortable with that, then, we at the end of the day, we just don't want a revolving door. No.
Good on the judge, says one listener on 2101. And a lot of feedback coming in about the kids and Pat Newman there from before. Damn, I wish I was a youngster at school today. Can't help but the fun I could have had, says John. Ministry of Education is incompetent, says another one. This is silly. The difficulty is that often the kids behaving in a way requiring restraint have parents most likely to complain to police or principals. So, what about the parents in all of this, says another listener. And Kerry says we need a reality check on this, and then uses a word that I can't read on radio. 3 minutes to 5 o'clock. Before we wrap up for the week on the panel, let's just have a quick look into libraries. You might remember a few weeks back an American economist, Panos Mordokotis, suggested public libraries should be shut down and replaced with companies like Amazon. People reared up and said libraries are much more than book depositories. And a Toronto Star columnist, Bob Hepburn, talked about how important the social functions of library are, such as being a warm, welcoming place for the city's homeless. They're safe, they're easy to enter, they're free to enter, there's free internet, you can stay for hours. But is that the library's job? Is it time for libraries to take on that level of social responsibility? It's interesting that Toronto Library has just hired a full-time social worker. What do you make of that?
Look, I think if it's delivering the services with the social worker, good on them. I applaud that. And libraries, Waiheke Island Library, there's kids playing in the kids' corners all the time. There's the Plunkett groups and the parent groups. It is a cornerstone of many sectors of society. And you're right, you only need to go down to Point Chevalier in Auckland to see the people coming up from Mason Clinic and around the social housing to hang out at the library.
And all these structures have changed over the years. A good example is the Manukau, train and bus station. Who have opened their doors, overnight for homeless.
So if the need
these
is
structures,
there,
if the need is there,
meet it.
So.
Yeah,
deliver for them.
Hey, thank you. Peter Fa'awhiu, Ruth Money, thanks for coming in today. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your company this afternoon, everybody at home.
Congratulations, Ruth. First time.
Well, Brian says 10 out of 10 to the new woman.
Oh, wow.
And
Bless you, Brian.
And Emil has made it, our producer who was heading to the airport, left early and has made it to the airport in less than 25 minutes.
We're freaking him out.
No. Sorry,
Thank you
Emil.
for your time. It's 5 o'clock.
Rangi Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Alex Perrottet. Coming up tonight, Housing New Zealand fronts the program but backs away from taking responsibility for some out-of-pocket tenants affected by that meth testing debacle. 10 people have been admitted to hospital in Christchurch after smoking a bad batch of synthetic cannabis. Some are in a critical condition. We've got an update on the Prime Minister's plans as she heads to the Big Apple for the United Nations General Assembly. Aurora Energy's boss fires a warning to his staff to stop leaking over power poles or he'll bring in the forensic experts. The Vice President of the World Anti-Doping Agency is upset over the move to reinstate Russia. Auckland City Mission farewells its Central City building just for a while, and New Zealand's oldest living Olympian hands the baton on to her granddaughter.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten aho. Housing New Zealand says people who rented their state houses through third-party agents and were kicked out over dodgy methamphetamine tests might not be eligible for compensation. The agency announced yesterday it will compensate people for household items they disposed of and moving costs and cancel all methamphetamine-related debt. But the Chief Executive, Andrew Mackenzie, says some of those people were living in houses were leased by third parties, such as community groups, so they weren't Housing New Zealand tenants. Mr Mackenzie says these tenants' claims for compensation will be treated on a case-by-case basis. Checkpoint will have more on this story shortly. The Housing Minister hopes a $339 million loan to Auckland Council will remove some of the roadblocks to getting more houses built in the city. The government is lending the money interest-free for 10 years to go towards residential infrastructure for new developments in the northwest of the city. Phil Twyford says the government needs to pull out all the stops to get development happening in Auckland because hundreds of thousands more homes are needed in the next 30 years.
There are currently an estimated 45,000 houses short in Auckland, and that flows through into overcrowding, homelessness and pressure on house prices.
Phil Twyford says the developments will be near the planned light rail line and be supported by growth at the Westgate Commercial Centre, providing local services and employment opportunities. Auckland Council will resume its 1080 drop in the Hunua Ranges soon, weather permitting. The Environment Court has rejected a bid appeal by a group, the Friends of Sherwood Trust, to stop the poison drop. The court said it's not persuaded there's likely to be serious harm to the environment. The council's general manager of parks, Mace Ward, says while the drop won't be today, it's critical to get it done.
Importantly, the court's been satisfied that we've undertaken an extensive consultation program and we have the necessary measures in place to ensure that the environmental impacts, if any, are managed. And importantly, I think it recognises the importance of this operation for the protection of the biodiversity in the Hunua Ranges.
Mace Ward says they'll be hoping to get the drop done shortly, but will have to wait for a window in the weather. The Friends of Sherwood Trust is considering appealing against the Environment Court decision. Senior members of the Labour Party Māori caucus met the Prime Minister while an investigation into Meka Whaitiri was underway to express support for their colleague. Ms Whaitiri was stripped of her ministerial portfolios yesterday after an investigation into an altercation last month with her press secretary. Here's political reporter Joe Moyer.
Meka Whaitiri remains the Ikaroa Rāwhiti MP and co-chair of the Māori caucus. RNZ put questions to the Prime Minister about a meeting with Māori caucus members, but a spokesman for Jacinda Ardern's office says she won't be going into details about her deliberations. He says Ms Ardern's decision was made solely on the basis of a loss of confidence in Ms Whaitiri. The Māori Development Minister Nanaia Mahuta says she can't disclose any private conversations about the matter, but acknowledged Ms Whaitiri had been under immense pressure. From Parliament, Joe Moyer.
The police in Christchurch are knocking on the doors of dealers around the city in an effort to get a dangerous batch of synthetic drugs off the streets. In the past 48 hours, 10 people have been taken to Christchurch Hospital suffering seizures and heart attacks after smoking the drugs. 3 are in intensive care. It's believed they took drugs called AB or AMB Fubunaka, which has been linked to deaths in the North Island. Detective Inspector Greg Merton says he can confirm police are visiting dealers, but won't say if they have identified the dealer responsible for the batch of drugs now causing so many problems.
That's obviously a lot of work that goes into identifying the source of all their drugs, who's supplying them, and obviously they have to cooperate with who's supplying them with the drugs, which often they're reluctant to do. And then we go and work up that job and go and take care of them.
Christchurch Detective Inspector Greg Merton. Pupils at a Wairarapa primary school will need to be decontaminated after a plane dropped a mystery substance near the school grounds. Southend School in Carterton posted on social media that a decontamination unit has been set up at the school gate. The school has been in lockdown since 3 o'clock. Emergency services, including 4 ambulances and a helicopter, are at the school. Teachers had assumed the substance, dropped about 1 o'clock, was fertiliser. A lawyer who helped a human trafficker exploit Fijian workers by providing false information to Immigration New Zealand has been sentenced to 10 months home detention. Mohammed Idris Hanif provided legal services to Feroz Ali, who in 2016 was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison after being found guilty of human trafficking, the first conviction of its kind in New Zealand. Hanif gave false and misleading visa applications on behalf of the Fijian workers, saying they were genuine tourists so they could continue working in Ali's jib-fixing business. Hanif will also face disciplinary action that could see him barred from practising law. It's 5:05. Sport. The All Blacks captain Kieran Reid will miss the side's test against Argentina. Coach Steve Hansen says leaving Reid at home for the Buenos Aires test was always part of their plan, as he only returned to Super Rugby with the Crusaders in June following surgery on his spine in December.
Original plan was always to make sure we don't have him sitting in a plane too long, and when you go to Argentina then to South Africa, short turnaround and not a great ride from Argentina to South Africa, so smart play was leave him at home and then send him straight down.
The side flies out to Buenos Aires this evening. Questions over the role of the International Olympic Committee played in Russian athletes being reinstated to international competition have been raised by the former head of the World Anti-Doping Agency. WADA has lifted its ban on the Russian Anti-Doping Agency after it was suspended 3 years ago because of state-backed systematic doping and cover-ups in Russian sport. The reinstatement has been condemned by national anti-doping bodies globally, and New Zealand's David Howman, who was WADA's Director General for 13 years until 2016.
A lot of pressure was put on WADA by the International Olympic Committee. They only had a ban on Russia for 86 days. They felt that Russia had done enough. They wanted to put the past behind them, and I think it comes down to power and money.
Former WADA Director, New Zealander David Howman. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we hope to get through to the South Pole, where the sun has just risen. Country Life visits the Wild West in the far north. There's a sonic tonic dedicated to the colour blue. And then there's this flighty number.
Good-looking duck, aren't they? The paradise duck. So what do you think happened with this one, Nigel? It's taken a fancy to you.
Yeah, so apparently they mate for life.
Right, so you're it. That's Lately with Karen Hay on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland and Auckland. A few showers turning to rain this evening and tonight. Rain clearing Auckland tomorrow afternoon, then Northland tomorrow night. Waikato to Kapiti, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty and the central high country. Cloudy periods and a few showers clearing south of Waikato tonight and elsewhere tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, a few showers spreading north this evening, then clearing Wairarapa tomorrow evening. Wellington, cloudy periods, a few showers possible overnight. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly cloudy with a few showers clearing overnight, fine tomorrow. Otago and Southland, fine apart from isolated showers about the south coast, retreating to Stewart Island this evening. Bulla and Westland, mostly fine, however cloud and a few showers for Bulla, clearing tonight. Fiordland, fine today, a few showers tomorrow, and for the Chatham Islands, a few showers. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Coming up on Checkpoint, 10 people are in hospital in Christchurch after smoking a dodgy batch of synthetic cannabis. We'll have the latest on the Whitsunday shark attacks in Australia, and Aurora Energy's CEO fires a warning shot to staff. But we begin just one day on from Housing New Zealand's pledge to compensate out-of-pocket tenants booted from their homes over dodgy meth testing. Tonight, Checkpoint can exclusively reveal that some might not be eligible at all. The CEO of Housing New Zealand, Andrew Mackenzie, told Checkpoint this afternoon that people who had rented their Housing New Zealand homes through third-party agents such as iwi may not be eligible for compensation from Housing New Zealand. But that's not correct, according to at least one agency we've spoken to. So who was right, who's responsible, and who should pay up? I asked Andrew Mackenzie why he made yesterday's apology and commitment.
We moved people out of homes where there was evidence of contamination from methamphetamine use. We used a standard which was too low and is now acknowledged to be too low, and then we didn't rehouse them. We're trying to take a fair and reasonable approach and provide this assistance to people who could not afford the costs that were imposed on them by moving out of their homes and by having, in some cases, to destroy goods.
Also yesterday, we visited Rima Herbert, who, with his wife Pauline, cares for his 3 grandchildren. The couple was evicted back in 2016 following an extensive contamination report that stated the house should not be tenanted and that surfaces and materials in the house were contaminated. Rima told us he's still out of pocket after paying to clean the house and having thrown away most of his possessions, which he estimated cost about $15,000. He said it was a highly stressful time and it's disappointing that compensation for hurt and humiliation isn't also being considered.
I got an assistance from WINS and they paid for the hotel. Obviously I have to pay that back, which I'm still doing at the moment. But there's costs like removing the furniture. Now in the report it says that the furniture's contaminated, we should get rid of it. So, you know, there's a high cost to that. And so who's responsible for that?
Who is responsible for that? Housing New Zealand says despite owning the property, commissioning and paying for the methamphetamine report, which clearly stated the house shouldn't be tenanted, it's not necessarily responsible. Last night, after we aired Rima's story, we received a phone call from Housing New Zealand telling us the Herberts wouldn't be eligible for compensation because they rented the house from Ruapōtaka Marae Incorporated Society, who in turn rented from the owner, Housing New Zealand. Here's Andrew Mackenzie again.
So as the building owner, we may have tested it for them, but they were the organisation that made the decision that they needed to test the property based on that evidence. We warned them about it, and obviously given our scale as an organisation, we were able to organise for that testing to occur. But the decision as to what happened to Mr Herbert, the decision to ask him to leave the home, that was made by them, given that they were the landlord for Mr Herbert.
So you are saying you did not, as Housing New Zealand, you did not evict Rima Herbert and his family?
We did not evict Rima Herbert and his family.
Will Rima Herbert be getting compensation?
So this is an interesting case for us. It's one, as I've said to you, we're going to take a case-by-case basis. Mr Herbert has been in contact with us, so we will look at the circumstances. But it's important to understand that landlords right across New Zealand were affected by the guidelines.
Yes, but what we're talking about here, Andrew, I'm sorry, with respect, I need to make this very, very specific here, Andrew, and that is that we are talking about Housing New Zealand. That's why we've got you on the program. And I want to know how many, I'm sorry, Andrew, but I've just got to ask this question because it's not just Rima we're worried about here. We're worried about all the people that are in Rima and his family's situation. How many other people held a tenancy with someone other than Housing New Zealand when you owned the property? How many other people are in that category?
So can I just, I think it is important that your audience understand this. All landlords were affected by the guidelines as to what was a safe and healthy house to live in. And the Tenancy Tribunal was using those guidelines to determine whether or not a landlord was liable to pay damages for putting people into a home that was unsafe.
Checkpoint visited Ruapōtaka Marae today, where management confirmed it did not request or pay for the meth testing to be done. We understand Ruapōtaka Marae recommends tenants for Housing New Zealand, but is not the landlord. Checkpoint has a copy of the test report, one of many that has since been found to have applied unreasonable thresholds for meth levels. It is addressed only to Housing New Zealand's Chemical Requests team and has a HNZ reference number. So things were not looking good for the Herberts, and who knows how many others who were also evicted and had a level of middle management between them and Housing New Zealand. But when we called Rima this morning, he told us Housing New Zealand had called him earlier in the day, and this is what he was told.
She was explaining that she was going to be like our case manager, and she'll deal with our case. We were top priority, and then she laid out some stuff that it could take a number of weeks to get it all sorted out. So I said to her that, look, our conversation should be recorded in terms of by way of email.
Housing New Zealand did follow up with an email which states he's been assigned for individual consideration for HNZ's assistance package. So who was the Herberts' landlord and who is responsible for compensating them? The Ruapōtaka Marae Incorporated Society says it's not them. And Andrew Mackenzie says it's not Housing New Zealand.
In terms of houses that we lease to community group organisations, and we lease around 3,000 houses to community group organisations, and, ranging from Women's Refuge through trusts associated with integrating people coming out of jail into the community, through to the iwi-based trust, which Mr Herbert was in. There's about 3,000 properties. Those landlords are responsible for the behaviour of the tenants that they choose to put in those homes.
As I said before, what we're looking at here are the houses and this very policy that you've come out yesterday saying is that you're acting with goodwill, that you're looking for a fair and decent approach here. I want to know how many people are in Rima's situation where it's a Housing New Zealand owned house, and it seems from the tone that you're giving us now that they may not be eligible for being out of pocket, just like anyone else was who was evicted.
So to be very clear to you, what we've said is we will look at each individual circumstance, but it is very important to understand we are not responsible for the decisions that those other organisations make.
At this stage, it's unclear where this leaves Rima and his family and whether they'll be compensated at all. If we get to speak to Housing New Zealand, if you were able to sit down at a table with the boss of Housing New Zealand, what's your message? What would you have to say?
Get your act together and, and carry out the duties that you're supposed to be doing.
That's Rima Herbert. I spoke to him earlier today. That's his message for Housing New Zealand. As you could hear in that package, we did not get the information yet from Housing New Zealand, from Andrew McKenzie, about how many people are in Rima's situation. We will find that out for you and let you know, for your sake and for his. We went to Phil Twyford, the Minister of Housing. He would not comment today, saying it was an operational matter for Housing New Zealand. Obviously, much more to come on this. Stay tuned to Checkpoint. It's coming up to 17 minutes past 5. 10 people, some suffering seizures and heart attacks, have been admitted to hospital in Christchurch after smoking a bad batch of synthetic drugs. The police are now knocking on the doors of known drug dealers in the city in the hope of finding its source. Dr Mark Gilbert is helping to treat the 10 patients at Christchurch Hospital. He told Checkpoint's Christchurch reporter Logan Church these people were gambling with their lives.
Over the last 48 hours, we've had 10 presentations of synthetic cannabis overdose, which has left 10 people in various states of unconsciousness, and 3 of them have been admitted to the intensive care unit, and the other 7 we've been able to manage within the emergency department with stays of up to 24 hours. All these patients have been critically unwell.
When did they come in?
So they come in mainly actually in the afternoon, evening and early hours of the morning, but they can come in at any time of the day.
What symptoms did these patients in particular show when they came into the emergency department?
Sure, so these patients without fail are in various states of unconsciousness, so usually they are unable, they're essentially asleep, they've often vomited. Some of them have been very agitated, they have a very fast heart rate, sometimes they have a slow heart rate, and the most severe ones have been completely unconscious, and we've had to commence full resuscitation, and we've ended up sending them to the intensive care unit.
We are hearing anecdotally that synthetic cannabis is becoming an increasing problem in Christchurch in particular. Is that also being reflected at the hospital with people coming in? Would you agree that that trend is on the rise?
So it's difficult to comment about Christchurch as a whole, but what we do know is that certainly over the last couple of years, synthetic cannabis has become more prevalent in the emergency department, both acute overdose and addiction. What we know over the last 48 hours is that there's obviously a bad batch in Christchurch at the moment, and people are experiencing unusually severe symptoms where ordinarily they might not experience symptoms that severe.
What would make a batch bad, so to speak?
Well, it's difficult to know because I don't make the batch, but what we know is that it doesn't really matter how much a person smokes. It can be a small amount or a large amount, but again, over the last 48 hours, these people just seem to be very severely affected.
What's the current condition of them? They've been in hospital for 48 hours. Where are they at now? Are they likely to come through this and see the other side, so to speak?
It's difficult to be 100% sure at this stage, but we think that they will, yes. There have been some patients discharged already, and to the best of my knowledge, there's still 3 patients in the intensive care unit.
And what's their situation now?
You're going to have to ask the intensive care unit about that.
And more people presenting with synthetic cannabis symptoms?
Yep, for sure. Over the last 2 years, we've noticed more people presenting with synthetic cannabis symptoms. That's just a general mild rise, but certainly over the last 48 hours, this is something else.
Why do you think that is rising?
Well, we assume that the prevalence of it is increasing.
And the dangers of taking it?
Well, the dangers of taking it are, well, ultimately this can cause death, and has done in the North Island last year. We've seen people that have been critically unwell here, so you're gambling with your life if you take this stuff.
That was Dr. Mark Gilbert speaking with Logan Church. We will hear more from the police about what they are doing to find the drug's source after 6 o'clock. It's 21 past 5. Emergency services in Queensland have described a shark attack on a 12-year-old girl as horrific. The girl was attacked in the Whitsundays yesterday afternoon. It was the second shark attack in the area in less than 24 hours. Our reporter Sarah Robson has the details.
Dramatic video shows a rescue helicopter rushing to the scene of the attack in Sid Harbour on Whitsunday Island in North Queensland. The girl, who is understood to have a connection to New Zealand, was bitten on the upper thigh. She received life-saving first aid at the scene before being flown to Mackay Base Hospital in a critical condition, where she was given blood transfusions. Today she was transported to Lady Cilento Children's Hospital in Brisbane. A vet is reported to have been at the beach and helped the young girl before rescue crews arrived. Tracy Eastwick from Queensland Ambulance Service says the girl suffered very large wounds and severe blood loss. It was the second attack in the area in less than 24 hours. Justine Barwick, a 46-year-old from Tasmania, was swimming off a yacht on Wednesday when she was mauled by a shark. Whitsunday Regional Council Mayor Andrew Wilcox says the past 24 hours have been unbelievable.
As usual with the news these days, you just got to check that it's right. Yeah, very, very, very surprised because extremely rare event to happen in the Whitsundays and, yeah, just in shock actually.
Dr John Haddock of Mackay Base Hospital happened to be on a nearby yacht and helped slow Justine Barwick's bleeding before a rescue helicopter arrived. She was then flown to the Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital on Wednesday night and transferred to the intensive care unit in a stable condition. Jeff Krause from the Queensland Shark Control Program says urgent shark control measures will be installed today after the 2 attacks.
Due to the nature of these multiple attacks, Fisheries Queensland is going to deploy 3 drum lines in that area, the Sid Harbour area, just in a bid to try and catch some of the sharks in that area.
Jeff Krause says it's unlikely that it was the same shark involved in both attacks. It's not known what types of sharks were involved in the attacks, and there are various types of whaler, tiger and bull sharks in the area. But for now, visitors are being warned against swimming in or near Sid Harbour. Federal MP George Christensen says holiday makers need to feel safe.
It might avert a further disaster. Tourists and tourist operators need the surety and security of knowing that the waters that they're swimming in are as safe as they possibly can be.
Shark attacks have killed 1 person and injured 14 others in Australia this year. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
Coming up to 24 minutes past 5 in breaking news, 10 Wairarapa school children have been taken to hospital after a plane dropped a mystery substance near 2 schools this afternoon. All school students at Carterton's South End and Montessori schools, which share a campus, are going through a decontamination process. We'll have more on this developing story throughout the program. To Dunedin now, where RNZ has obtained an email from Aurora Energy's Chief Executive, Richard Fletcher, warning staff against leaking information to the media and threatening to bring in forensic experts if those leaks continue. It follows a checkpoint investigation into the condition of the power company's poles amid revelations that more than 9,000 were red tagged for replacement last March, but then reduced to fewer than 1,800 8 months later without explanation. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown has more.
I was wondering if there was any possibility of being able to speak to Richard.
He's actually in a meeting right at this moment. He is around though. I will, if it's okay, I'll just pass your details on to him and get him to give you a call back.
That's the closest Checkpoint's come to having a conversation with Aurora boss Richard Fletcher on the phone. His staff insist he will only be interviewed once an independent report into the company's ageing network is complete next month. But Mr Fletcher had plenty to say to staff earlier this week. In the long, detailed internal email to staff, obtained by RNZ, Mr Fletcher insists the council-owned power company has not underspent on its network and regularly inspects and replaces its power poles. It follows a month-long Checkpoint investigation which began when whistleblower Richard Healy revealed the dire state of a rotten power pole in the suburb of Green Island. While that pole has since been replaced, Checkpoint revealed last week that more than 9,500 red-tagged power poles were on Aurora's network last March. Within 8 months, that number had mysteriously reduced to less than 1,800, despite nowhere near 7,000 poles being replaced on the network during that time. In his email, Mr Fletcher says media reports indicate staff members are leaking information. Whistleblower Richard Healy, who walked away from the company 2 years ago after revealing the concerning state of Aurora's network, is outraged.
The information that's been released so far has been released because the staff understand that it's critical to the safe operation of the network and it needs to be out there in the public.
In his email, Richard Fletcher goes on to liken such leaks to theft and implores staff to stop and question why such people would work for the company. He even suggests bringing in forensic specialists if the leaks continue. Richard Healy says the email is not transparent.
Richard Fletcher's nailed his colours to the mast, and unsurprisingly, the new colours are the same as the old colours. The same corporate policy of opaqueness and the same lack of visibility of operations is evident with the new version of Aurora as with the old version. It's an incredibly disappointing situation.
On Monday, more than 4,000 customers in the Queenstown Lakes District lost power after heavy snowfall. Waitaki MP, Jackie Dean, whose constituency is partly serviced by Aurora, says the email shows the company's priorities are skewed.
My concern here is that Aurora Energy charge their consumers for their services. Their services are failing and clearly are not coping with, most recently, a snow event, which was entirely predictable. And I would have thought that their focus should be on remedying that. I believe that Aurora have, by putting through internal emails looking for whistleblowers, are perhaps misdirecting their attentions.
Mr Fletcher, in the email, says he is reluctant to discuss matters before the review is complete. That is expected to happen in mid to late October. In the meantime, our invitation to talk remains open. In Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
It's right on 28 minutes past 5. Hundreds of people are missing in Tanzania after a ferry capsized on Lake Victoria. More than 40 people are confirmed dead. Dozens more were rescued, but it's believed the boat was carrying up to 400 people. The vessel overturned close to the shore on the lake in the north of the country. The BBC's Caroline Rigby reports.
Rescuers at the scene of Tanzania's latest boating disaster. Reports suggest this passenger ferry may have been overloaded when it capsized, with as many as 400 people on board. Witnesses described seeing it sink in front of them.
Look, look, there's the ferry. It's sunk. Bodies are floating. It has just sunk right now.
The vessel overturned on Lake Victoria, the largest in Africa, straddling the borders of Tanzania, Uganda and Kenya, capsizing between the islands of Ukwere and Ukora. At least 40 people are known to have died, though that number is likely to rise, one official suggesting more than 200 people may have drowned. A major rescue and recovery mission is underway, with around 100 people recovered alive so far.
When the captain was trying to slow down and about to dock, the passengers were already running to the other side, ready to get off. So now the weight was too much on one side of the ferry, so it capsized and sank. It turned completely. It tumbled upside down.
This is far from the first nautical disaster in Tanzania, with overcrowding playing a role in many of those which have come before. At least 145 people died in 2012, when a packed ferry sank while transporting people to Zanzibar in the Indian Ocean. and almost 200 were killed in the same region the previous year. While in 1996, more than 800 people lost their lives in Lake Victoria, in one of the worst ferry disasters of the last century.
Caroline Rigby reporting. It's 5:30 and you're with Checkpoint. Coming up, Mayor John Booth of Carterton on the developing situation after 10 Wairarapa school children were taken to hospital this afternoon. A small Quake-hit settlement north of Kaikoura accuses the government of discrimination. And we meet 92-year-old Naire Galloway, New Zealand's oldest Olympian. Of course, we'd love your feedback on anything that you're interested in that we've been covering this evening. You can text us at 2101. We're on Twitter at CheckpointRNZ. We're also on Facebook, Checkpoint. Or email us, checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We'd love to hear what you're thinking. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the news headlines.
10 pupils at Carterton South End School have been taken to hospital after a mystery substance was dropped from the air near the school grounds. The school has been in lockdown since 3 this afternoon, and all pupils and staff have to be decontaminated before leaving the school. Teachers had assumed the substance was fertiliser. People who rented their state houses through third-party agents and were evicted over dodgy methamphetamine tests may miss out on compensation. The agency announced yesterday it will compensate people for household items they disposed of and moving costs and cancel all methamphetamine-related debt. But the Chief Executive, Andrew Mackenzie, says some of those people were living in houses leased by community groups, so they weren't Housing New Zealand tenants. Auckland Council is pressing on with its 1080 drop in the Hunua Ranges after the Environment Court rejected an appeal to stop the poison drop. The court said it's not persuaded there's likely to be serious harm to the environment. The council's General Manager of Parks says the drop won't be today, but it's critical to get it done. The police in Christchurch are checking drug dealers in a bid to get a dangerous batch of synthetic cannabis off the streets. In the past 2 days, 10 people from all over the city have been admitted to Christchurch Hospital, suffering seizures and heart attacks after smoking the drugs. The police will not say if they've identified the dealer responsible. A lawyer who provided false information to Immigration New Zealand to help a human trafficker exploit Fijian workers has been sentenced to 10 months home detention. Mohammed Idris Hanif provided legal services to Faroz Ali, who in 2016 was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison after being found guilty of human trafficking, the first conviction of its kind in New Zealand. Hanif told authorities the Fijian workers were genuine tourists, so they could continue working in Ali's jib-fixing business. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Kia ora, Katrina. Thank you very much. Haere rā to you and haere mai to Nona Peltier, joins us in the studio for the business update. Good evening.
Hello.
Now, the Warehouse, this is New Zealand's biggest retailer. Now, they had flat sales, but they made a solid profit. How'd they do that?
Well, they've changed their policies. So basically, they moved away from this high-low pricing where you'd get a discount to a everyday low pricing model. So that apparently that caused them to, their sales dropped a little bit, but their margins improved significantly, and so that made a really big difference for the company. Their profit overall rose 12% to $22.9 million. Now, that was actually not a bad result for the full year. That was better than they were expecting in the end. They had some write-downs around just a non-cash item on Torpedo 7 business, and they had signaled that earlier. And they also had $8 million of restructuring costs. So the company is really trying to transform itself, and they think they're on the right track. They have a strategy that they expect to be able to fully implement over the next 18 months to 24 months.
Sounds like they're on the right track. If they're not making that many sales, but they're making a profit, I mean, that must be, they've found something magic there.
They've done something, they've certainly had to do something, that's for sure. And look, their share price didn't do too badly as a result. Well, let's see. Yeah, it fell about 0.5%. That's 1 cent only, 1 cent to $2.02. So pretty good. And for a while, it was fairly steady. But you know, look, this is a company that's going to have to battle. Like we've heard, the retail sector overall is going to have a hard go over the next, 6 months for sure. We are expecting that.
Now, the number of people coming to settle in New Zealand has fallen. That's a 3-year low. Why is that?
Well, it's really that more people are leaving to go to Australia. Those people are
Numbers
going
are back
again.
up.
Yeah, they're going. Well, I guess, Australia's looking a little happier country, so people are saying, okay, we're off. I guess that's what's happening. Anyway, I wouldn't call it an exodus. It's only a slight increase. And in fact,
don't talk it up. We don't
no,
want to
we're not
encourage
talking it
people to
up.
go.
I'm not trying to talk it up. But in fact, our net migration gains had an uptick last month. We had just over 5,000 people arrive. Overall, even though we're low, it's 63,300 people more than arrived than left in the year to August, and that compares with 72,500. So it's still quite a large number of people, not as many as we had before, but then with the changes in migration policy, why wouldn't we expect that?
Maybe not as low as what we may have expected after the promises before the election.
That's possible. I'm not an expert on what numbers they were expecting, but I'll tell you what, our visitor numbers are still up 4% on last year to 3.8 million visitors.
That's
there you
good.
go.
We've still got the tourism.
We've got the tourism people coming, that's for sure.
How's the markets looking?
Okay, well, our index was kind of looking sluggish. I thought, we're going to miss out on that new record this week. But no, it perked up at the end, just as Asia did. We rose 15 points to a new record high, 9,376. And our Kiwi, it's flying strongly since that better economic data yesterday. And we held on to our overnight gains, so 66.9 US cents, 91.7 Australian, and 50.4 pence.
I love how excited you are about all of that.
It's exciting.
That's great. Stay excited. Keep us interested. Thank you, Nona. Nona Peltier there with the latest on business. It's it's just gone past 25 minutes to 6. Here's a quote. "Today we failed the clean athletes of the world." That's how the Vice President of the World Anti-Doping Agency described its decision to end its 3-year suspension on Russia's anti-doping body today. Now, the ban followed a major scandal over massive state-backed systematic doping and cover-ups in Russian sport. Our sports editor Stephen Hewson has the story.
The World Anti-Doping Agency had repeatedly said the Russian doping agency RUSADA wouldn't be reinstated until it satisfied key criteria. That included recognising the findings of the McLaren report and allowing access to stored urine samples and data at RUSADA's Moscow laboratory. But now it's done an about-face, lifting the suspension and imposing a watered-down version of its original demands, despite fierce opposition from athletes and other anti-doping bodies. New Zealander David Howman, who was the WADA Director General for 13 years up until 2016, is among those dismayed by the decision.
Pretty disappointing, really. WADA says it stands up for the clean athlete, and in this instance, the clean athlete's being totally ignored. Russia has not accepted that they have been involved in a state-sponsored doping program, and that the data inside the laboratory is going to be released, but conditionally. So it's a bit of a weak compromise, in my view.
The head of America's anti-doping agency, Travis Tygart, says WADA has put the wishes of a handful of sports administrators above the rights of millions of clean athletes and billions of fans worldwide. And that, he says, casts a dark shadow over the credibility of the anti-doping movement.
I think they are on life support, and we have to figure out, those who care about clean sport and the rights of athletes, figure out how to ensure that WADA is truly free of the IOC and a few sport promoters who hold the power there, and attempt to set it up on a path that it's going to actually do the job that it's tasked to do. And that means being independent.
The Auckland weightlifter Cameron McTaggart feels let down by the decision. He's competed many times for New Zealand against athletes who have failed drug tests, and he's worried drug cheats will affect his results as he seeks funding to qualify for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics.
If we are performing at our best, the best that any clean athlete can, but then you get these drug cheats coming in and outperforming what is humanly possible by a clean athlete, they are going to be placed higher than us, so we don't get the funding.
David Howman points to the influence of the International Olympic Committee in getting WADA to lift its ban.
A lot of pressure was put on WADA by the International Olympic Committee. They only had a ban on Russia for 86 days. They felt that Russia had done enough. They wanted to put the past behind them. And I think it comes down to power and money.
Although the International Olympic Committee reinstated Russia in February, the International Association of Athletic Federations suspension remains in place. Some Russian athletes have competed as neutrals in international competition after proving their anti-doping credentials. But Howman says the decision means Russia won't be forced to hand over samples and data that could prove further doping of yet-to-be-caught athletes.
There's a lot of samples still in the laboratory, but we haven't seen them. Nobody's seen them. And those samples could indicate a number of cheating athletes. In addition, there's a lot of data on their computers inside the laboratory, which would likewise show a number of athletes, probably up into the hundreds, have cheated and haven't been sanctioned. If they think that the Russians haven't done something to all this information, then somebody's living in dreamworld.
Russia, unsurprisingly, has welcomed the decision. RUSADA Director General Yuri Ganis says it's a positive sign for suspended Russian track and field athletes, weightlifters and Paralympians. But more work needs to be done to secure reinstatement, a reinstatement that's been greeted with dismay around the world. For Checkpoint, Stephen Hewson.
It's 20 minutes to 6. A small quake-hit settlement north of Kaikoura is accusing the government of discrimination. A dangerous cliff in Raukatara has forced 5 homeowners out of their homes or holiday homes after it rained boulders down on them during the 2016 Kaikoura earthquake. Now, the residents want to be paid out and leave, but the local council doesn't have the money to do it, even with a government contribution of $1.5 million. They now say the government needs to stop treating them like second-class citizens and stump up more cash like it did after the Christchurch earthquake. Here's Logan Church.
At their Christchurch home, Joe and Les Davidson and their Labrador Richie McPaw are waging war against what they describe as discrimination.
I think there's a discrimination against a small community, and not only that, it's just not justice. We just want justice. We just want to be treated the same as the other people were. You know, some equality in there.
The couple were in a meeting between the Kaikoura District Council and 5 Rakotara homeowners last week. The house once belonged to Joe's father, and they used to holiday there several times a year. The homes have Section 124 notices on them due to the risk of boulders coming down from a neighbouring cliff on their properties, which is exactly what happened during the Kaikoura earthquake.
To give you an idea of what the hill was like behind my father's betch, my son had written a poem at school when he was about 9. So you describe it as, at the back of the betch is a steep hill covered with trees. If the weather is good, we go for a climb up it. The slope is steep, so you have to watch where you put your feet. Isolated patches of native stinging nettle hide among the ferns, waiting to attack an unsuspecting climber, a cobra ready to strike. At the back of the hill is a huge drop. I always wondered how smashed up I would get if I fell to the bottom.
The government is giving $1.5 million to the Kaikoura District Council to solve land hazard issues. 15 properties in total across the district are affected. All residents Checkpoint has spoken to want to be paid out, like the government did for Christchurch red zone landowners. Thousands of Christchurch homes were bought by the government at a cost of about $1.5 billion, under the now defunct Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Act. But back in Kaikoura, $1.5 million is clearly not enough to pay out 15 properties. Joe and Les thinks the government needs to stump up more cash.
You know, we realise that the Kaikoura Council is a small council, that it doesn't have the resources, the financial resources to pay the landowners out, but we feel that central government has an obligation to treat us with the same dignity and respect that they treated people in Christchurch who were in a very similar situation to us.
The Kaikoura District Council itself is in no place to help financially. It's a council that struggled to find funding for a single new public toilet earlier this year. It's a council that simply has no money. And that's where Joe and Les thinks the government needs to step up.
They're hiding behind the fact that they're saying their legislature is different. There's a different act of parliament or something that doesn't allow them to treat you the same. But I don't go that. I think, you know, you just got to treat people as New Zealanders. We're New Zealanders. We all pay taxes. We pay our insurance and our GST levies. We're all Kiwis. We should all be treated the same way by central government.
During last week's meeting, the council's chief executive, Angela Oosthuizen, promised to relay those sentiments to the government.
Since that meeting last week, we've been having conversations with senior staff at the Department of Internal Affairs to give them an overview of what information the residents shared with us. We've also had our meeting with the Kaikoura Recovery Steering Group, and once again we shared all the information that was spoken about last week, and we've definitely raised all the points that were made by the Rukaksha residents.
I also asked Ms Oosthuizen what she made of the accusation the government was being discriminatory.
it would be premature of me to make any comment.
Previous communication between Checkpoint and the government on this issue has involved several government ministers. EQC Minister Megan Woods, Civil Defence Minister Chris Farfoy, and Local Government Minister Nanaia Mahuta. Joe and Les have also attempted to try and talk to the government directly.
I've had sent numerous emails to Megan Woods. She probably knows me quite well by now. Megan did give me the honour of phoning me and having a chat to me about the situation. She said that it wasn't actually an EQC matter because the house and land weren't actually damaged to non-repair by an earthquake, but it's the imminent rockfall. So she suggested that it was Chris Farfoy's jurisdiction. So I copied him in on all the emails I sent to Megan and heard nothing back from him at all.
We asked all of the before-mentioned ministers' offices yesterday morning for interviews. The response so far? Absolutely nothing. Angela Oosthuizen says she hopes the council will make a decision as to what to do soon. Joe and Les just want to be rid of the house and the problem by the end of the year. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Logan Church tēnei.
It's almost 14 minutes to 6. Malaysia has become a new dumping ground for plastic waste from New Zealand and other countries. New Zealand's plastic waste exports to Malaysia have tripled in the first 6 months of this year after China banned waste imports. And while the number of waste recycling factories has mushroomed in the Asian nation, is the plastic that we're offloading really being dealt with properly when it gets there? And should New Zealand be offloading its plastic on countries struggling to deal with their own? Nita Blake-Person travelled to Malaysia to investigate.
Hidden within the trees of this palm oil plantation in Jinjerome, a town about an hour's drive from Kuala Lumpur, is a huge mountain of plastic. Car parts, food packaging, cleaning products and old toys are in piles several metres deep, sprawling across a huge clearing. A local resident, CK Lee, says most of the plastic is from Europe, but some is from Australia and has been exported here to be recycled.
This is the storage space for that illegal factory, which has been shut down by enforcement. And I believe this is actually agricultural land, and they just use it as a store yard.
CK Lee says business has been booming for illegal processing factories since China's ban on plastic imports came into effect at the start of this year. Malaysia is now the new destination for the waste from many countries, including Australia and New Zealand. But it's not always being dealt with properly when it gets there.
This pile of rubbish has got a mixture of all sort of rubbish, and these illegal factories would just pick and choose what they want and process them. And those that they don't want, they just burn them, burn them openly. And just a shame,
In July, authorities discovered that of 38 factories they visited in Selangor, the state this factory is in, only 3 had licences. Many of the plastics the illegal factories process are filthy and contaminated, and the water used to wash them is dumped into nearby rivers and waterways. Plastic that the factories can't recycle is often burned, which is having a terrible impact on the health of those living nearby. Sandra Murray is a waste management consultant who works with councils and businesses here in New Zealand. She says it's very difficult for them to verify where their plastic actually ends up.
Most councils are one waste officer who may not even be full-time doing waste. They might also do roading, they might do the 3 waters as well as waste. They're not resourced to do that kind of downstream checking. And they probably just, at the time of procurement of a contract, when they go out to tender for a waste contract, they might ask the companies to give that information, but it would very quickly be out of date because even from month to month end markets change.
Smart Environmental, the country's 3rd largest recycler, is running out of space for the plastic it collects and sorts from 16 councils in the Upper North Island. The company's Central Region Manager, Lane Sefton, says while grades 1 and 2 can be recycled in New Zealand, the rest of the plastic needs to be shipped overseas.
People think that once it's gone into the recycling bin, they can feel good, I'm a recycler, but really at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff that they put into the bins is not recyclable. There's no value in it. and very much is out of sight, out of mind.
Mr Sefton says the New Zealand recycling industry is in crisis, with businesses unable to recoup the costs of collecting and sorting the plastics. He wants the government to come up with a comprehensive plan for dealing with the country's waste and says it needs to happen urgently to stop New Zealand's plastic problem getting out of control. The Conservation Minister, Eugenie Sage, says the government is currently reviewing the impact of China's waste ban and is looking at what is happening to New Zealand's recycling exports. A report is expected to be presented to her next month. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Nita Blake Person, aho.
At 10 minutes to 6, you can actually watch and listen back at Nita's report there on our Facebook page, on our website rnz.co.nz. There's pictures to go with that. And of course, you can hear more about New Zealand's plastic exports to Malaysia on Insight after the 8 o'clock news on Sunday morning. The teal green facade with its burgundy sign and queues of people lining up for food and support is a familiar sight in central Auckland. For many, the Auckland City Mission is home. But now it's farewelling its Central City building for 2 years while it undergoes a major development. From tomorrow, the mission will be based on Union Street, while a new multi-purpose building goes up at the Hobson Street site. But bidding ka kite anō to the original site has the City Mission's community feeling reflective. Eva Corlett reports.
Yeah, this place got a lot of memories.
Vernon has been visiting the City Mission for nearly 2 decades.
So I can remember when I was living with a friend out of Mount Roskill, my girlfriend and I came down from a farm up in Massey. We ran out of food one weekend. We'd run flat out of food. And this friend said, because I had a car at the time, I'll show you where to go. This is all we gave. Brought me to the City Mission and they gave us the food parcel.
Vernon lives in state housing nearby. So what keeps him coming back to the mission?
People. I love people. I mean, at first I came back for myself, but after time I just realised that I come back here for the people. I absolutely adore and I love people, even the funny looking ones.
The former Prince of Wales pub has housed the mission for 38 years, but the small, ageing building is no longer considered fit for purpose. So, for the next 2 years, the mission will take up temporary residence at 23 Union Street, a few blocks around the corner. When Helen Robinson, the mission's social services manager, shows me around, builders are frantically working to get the new mission ready to open on Monday.
Literally, boxes are being unpacked as we talk here. The quarter centre will be open for operation on Monday morning, so we have a busy weekend ahead of us.
Ms Robinson has mixed emotions about moving from the old site.
There is a deep sense that for some people Hobson Street is home. And so there is a sadness and an anxiety about leaving home and what will the new be.
But there is optimism too.
The other night someone said to me as I saw the moving boxes leave our front door, and I was concerned about that, or somewhat sad. And he said to me, Helen, don't be sad. It's just going to be better when we go to Union Street, and then when we come back it's going to be even better.
The new mission building on Hobson Street will flank the current one, which has heritage status. It will include 80 high-density apartments, a comprehensive medical service and the city's largest detox unit. 40 units will be for the chronically homeless and the rest for those on the social housing wait list. Ms Robinson says it's the first New Zealand example of a common ground model, a form of supported living for those with high complex needs.
Critical to this model is what we call a concierge service, so that there will be a 24-hour social worker on site and a 24-hour security guard on site. And both of those hand in hand enable safety and structure.
Those with complex needs have the option of living in the unit for life. City Missioner Chris Farrelly says the building has eco-features and looks to te ao Māori principles.
We asked our architects, don't build us a commercial building, build us a home in the city that will reflect the spirit of what a home is. So it's a beautiful looking building with almost like a whare nui top.
And the homeless community has been instrumental in developing the plans.
Firstly, what they wanted was very simple. Please give us a place where we can have showers. Please give us a place where we can just put our gear during the day. As time went on, it was around, yes, we want more space to do our art, to do our carving, and then of course the big thing, can you give us a home?
The project will cost $90 million. The government is chipping in $34 million, with $10 million from Foundation North Trust and $27 million in donations. The mission is fundraising to get the remaining $18 million.
Tomorrow it will hold a breakfast and blessing at its new site. I tamaki makaurau mo te hotako te ahia hinei, ko Eva Colette tēnei.
Some very interesting artist impressions of the plans there. If you want to check that out again on our Facebook page or our website, if you want to listen back and have a view of Eva Corlette's story on the Auckland City Mission. At 5 minutes to 6, blood might be thicker than water, but it's swimming that binds a former New Zealand Olympic backstroker and her granddaughter. Nairi Galloway, who's 92 and lives in a Nelson rest home, is New Zealand's oldest living Olympian. 70 years after she swam backstroke at the London Olympics, her granddaughter, Gina Galloway, is about to compete in the same event at the Youth Olympics in Buenos Aires. The pair caught up in Nelson today ahead of Gina's departure for Argentina, and our Nelson reporter Tracy Neal was there to catch the moment.
New Zealand, one of the smaller teams who received specially warm applause.
It might have been 7 decades ago, but Nairi Galloway's memories come flooding back when she watches her granddaughter Gina backstroking her way through a pool.
A sort of a longing, really, inside me. I look at Gina swimming and think, golly, the strokes changed a bit. I don't think I had killer instinct, really.
Nairi might feel she lacked the killer instinct, but she's an inspiration to Gina.
For me, it's just that passion for swimming, the love of it. I think diving into that water, you know, the thrill of it, the thrill of racing and competing. I'm definitely a competitive person. I love the challenge of trying to better myself. And I think seeing Nana, you know, going to the Olympics has definitely inspired me.
Nairi was the only female athlete in the 7-strong New Zealand team at the 1948 Olympics. It was soon after the end of World War II and London still wore fresh scars. Training didn't stop on the 6-week journey by sea from New Zealand. The ship's carpenter built Nairi an oblong box, lined it with canvas and filled it with seawater each day so she could lie on her back and practice her kick.
Well, I suppose minimally, very minimally, it did help. But you can imagine just lying in the tub thing, kicking it. It's very difficult.
She had to wear a borrowed swimsuit at the Empire Pool in Wembley.
It belonged to a boy and it was a bit short around the bust area. Well, silk suits were unavailable because of the war, really. So that was all I had.
Nairi finished second in her Olympic 100-metre backstroke heat, 7th in her semi-final and 11th overall. But she didn't come home empty-handed. In the Continental Relay Gala held straight after the Olympic swim meet, her Australasian team won bronze in the 4x100-metre freestyle relay. So is Gina's love of backstroke in her genes?
I don't know. I think I naturally just really enjoyed backstroke. It was the stroke I was doing the best in, and coincidentally enough, my brother is also getting quite good at backstroke.
Gina won bronze at last year's Commonwealth Youth Games and will compete in backstroke and butterfly events at next month's Youth Olympics. The 17-year-old student at Auckland's Diocesan School for Girls says her success is the result of a punishing training routine and the support of her teammates. Nana Nairi keeps up with her progress via her iPad.
Thanks to technology we have today, she's able to live stream into the races I'm doing, and Dad always sends her the link so she can watch, and it's always cool knowing that she's watching from Nelson.
Nairi says the only piece of advice she'd offer her budding Olympian granddaughter is to keep cool and calm.
I don't have to ever tell you to keep focused, she's got that in spades, but to think of the moment, but to think of the very moment that what you're doing is what you've got to do best.
And Gina is as proud to carry on the family tradition as she might one day be to stand on the Olympic dais.
I think it's a really proud moment to continue the Galloway, or Lane, but Galloway name, in swimming. It's always going to be really proud and special in a family year.
The Youth Olympic Games run from October the 6th to the 18th. In Nelson for Checkpoint, Tracy Neal.
It's just coming up to 6. We've got a little bit of feedback here from John. John says this is about Nita Blake Person's report on the waste, her trip to Malaysia, revealing how they're handling waste coming from countries like our own. John says we are an advanced nation, certainly, but not always a moral one. No way should we be exporting our waste, John says. If it's our waste, we should deal with it. If we can't, then don't create the waste in the first place. John also says it's ironic too that this plastic is ending up in a palm oil plantation. Also, we do have John Booth, he's the Mayor of Carterton. He's coming up, he's currently at the Cordon at the school where 10 children were taken to hospital. We'll have more from him after the news at 6, which is coming up very shortly with Katrina Batten. Stand by.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten aho. 10 people have been taken to hospital after falling ill at a Wairarapa primary school this afternoon. South End School in Carterton has been in lockdown since 3 o'clock after a plane dropped an unknown substance nearby, causing numerous children to feel ill. Teachers had assumed the substance was fertiliser. Emergency services are at the school and a decontamination unit is set up at the school gate. All 107 pupils and staff need to be washed down before they can leave. Housing New Zealand says people who rented their state houses from community groups and were evicted over questionable methamphetamine tests may not get compensation. The agency announced yesterday it will compensate people for items they disposed of and moving costs and cancel all methamphetamine-related debt. However, its chief executive, Andrew Mackenzie, told Checkpoint people who rent the 3,000 state houses leased by third parties are not Housing New Zealand tenants.
What we've said is we will look at each individual circumstance, but it is very important to understand we are not responsible for the decisions that those other organisations make.
Andrew Mackenzie is unable to say how many people could be in that position. Police in Christchurch are knocking on doors of dealers around the city in an effort to get a dangerous batch of synthetic cannabis off the streets. In the past 48 hours, 10 people have been taken to Christchurch Hospital, suffering seizures and heart attacks after smoking the drugs. 3 are in intensive care. The police say they can confirm they are visiting dealers, but won't say if they have identified the dealer responsible for the bad batch of drugs circulating. And one of the doctors treating the people admitted to Christchurch Hospital says there is no guarantee the sickest will survive. Dr. Mark Gilbert says all of those people have taken either AB or AMB Fubinaca, which has been linked to numerous deaths in the North Island in the past year.
Synthetic cannabis is a very dangerous drug. There's no safe level to smoke, and we'd strongly advise that, particularly at the moment where there seems to be a bad batch in Christchurch, that people stay away from smoking even small amounts of this.
Mark Gilbert from Christchurch Hospital. The Waitaki MP, Jackie Dean, is calling on the Dunedin Lines company Aurora Energy to focus on its network rather than chasing scapegoats. Aurora's chief executive, Richard Fletcher, has threatened to bring in forensic specialists if leaks to the media continue in light of recent media reports about the Dunedin City Council-owned company and the state of its network. On Monday, more than 4,000 customers in the Queenstown Lakes district lost power after heavy snowfall. Ms Dean says the weather event was entirely predictable and the company should focus on its network reliability.
I think Aurora's focus should be on providing a good service to its consumers. That would be their first duty, and if they're not doing that, instead of looking for scapegoats, they should really be looking to fix the issue.
Waitaki MP Jackie Dean. Aurora Energy has declined RNZ requests for interviews. The government wants to overhaul disability and learning support in schools. The Associate Education Minister, Tracy Martin, has unveiled a draft action plan which aims to make schools more inclusive for children with additional learning needs and disabilities. Sarah Robson has more.
Tracy Martin says too many children have been missing out on the support they need to participate and achieve at school. One of the proposals includes beefing up the role of the Special Education Needs Coordinator, which is something a school staff member now does on top of their other duties. Ms Martin says she wants every child in every school to have access to that coordinator. Ms Martin also wants all children screened for dyslexia and dyspraxia between the ages of 6 and 8 so they can get the appropriate help to learn. Ko Sarah Robson, aho.
A canoeing club in the United States has filed a lawsuit against 2 government agencies for creating a no-go security zone along a stretch of river while the president plays golf. Donald Trump's club in Virginia is close to 2 sites on the Potomac River, which are popular with canoeists and kayakers. The BBC's Paddy Maguire reports.
The Canoe Cruisers Association of Greater Washington lodged its complaint after a 3-kilometre stretch of the river was designated off-limits whenever Mr Trump is at his course. The association argues that the ruling illegally restricts the public's access to the river, often with no advance warning. It says the Department of Homeland Security and the Coast Guard failed to consult the public before the exclusion was imposed last year.
Paddy Maguire in Washington. Vietnam's president has died. Tran Dai Quang, who was 61, died in hospital this morning. Vietnam television reports he died from a serious illness despite efforts by local and international doctors and professors. It's 5 minutes past 6. Sport, the All Blacks captain Kieran Reid will miss the side's trip to Argentina. The coach Steve Hansen says leaving Reid at home for the Buenos Aires test was always part of their plan, as he only returned to Super Rugby with the Crusaders in June following surgery on his spine in December. Hansen says having Reid sit on a plane for 2 long-haul flights is not a good idea, and Reid will now head straight to Pretoria for the side's final Rugby Championship test. Meanwhile, the Ioane brothers have signed long-term deals with New Zealand Rugby. All Black wing Rico Ioane has signed to the end of 2022, while older brother and loose forward Akira has signed on till 2021. The South Sydney player and England Rugby League international Sam Burgess has been cleared of any wrongdoing over a lewd photo scandal. The club says no player broke club or NRL rules after investigating the incident. The club says the woman at the centre of the scandal was interviewed by the NRL Integrity Unit but declined to speak to the South's investigation panel. The Women Warriors play competition frontrunners, the Brisbane Broncos, tonight in the final round of the regular season. The Broncos are unbeaten after 2 games. The Warriors have 1 win and 1 loss. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Dr. Christina Hoff-Summers speaks up for what she regards as the most disadvantaged gender in many ways. Rates of suicide and imprisonment, early death. Men are getting a rough deal. Tom Wright reports on the fraudster described as the Malaysian Great Gatsby. And Mandy White describes the extraordinary lengths she went to rescue her son from meth addiction. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, a few showers turning to rain this evening and tonight. Rain clearing tomorrow. Auckland tomorrow afternoon, then Northland tomorrow night. Waikato to Kapiti, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Cloudy periods and a few showers clearing south of Waikato tonight and elsewhere tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, a few showers spreading north this evening, then clearing Wairarapa tomorrow evening. Wellington, cloudy periods, a few showers possible overnight tonight. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly cloudy with a few showers, clearing overnight tonight, fine tomorrow. Otago and Southland, fine apart from isolated showers about the south coast, retreating to Stewart Island tonight. Buller and Westland mostly fine, however cloud and a few showers for Buller, clearing tonight. Fiordland fine today, a few showers tomorrow, and for the Chatham Islands a few showers. It's exactly 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Katrina. Emergency services are responding to a health scare at a Carterton primary school where children suddenly became very unwell. More than 100 people are going through a decontamination process as we talk, according to Wellington Free Ambulance. Students at South End Primary School in Carterton this afternoon started vomiting after a pungent smell of sulphur was detected in the air. The Carterton Mayor, John Booth, is at the South End School cordon and joins us now. Good afternoon, John.
Yes, good evening.
John, there's fairly patchy information at the moment. I think from the ambulance we ascertained that there were 10 people taken to hospital. The police have now just got in touch minutes ago saying 7 went to hospital. What can you tell us?
Yep, that sounds right. So mid-afternoon this afternoon, it was a sulphury, pungent smell smelt in the school grounds. We don't really know where it's come from. There was reports that an aircraft was seen flying over and a substance coming out of it. That's not confirmed. I'm here at the cordon at the moment with a lot of anxious parents, I would guess you'd say, waiting for their children who are now going through a decontamination process, 2 at a time. It is slow because they're rewarming the water as it goes through, because the temperatures here at the moment are very cold southerly wind.
Right, so John, just go through what's the decontamination process about? What's happening to the children?
Okay, so everybody that was on the site of the school, children and parents, teachers, but the children first are going through a decontamination tent, 2 at a time, and then they're being released to their parents.
Okay, and you've spoken to some of the parents there. I bet they're fairly concerned.
Yes, yeah, I've been with the parents for the last 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours. Initially, there were some, really quite upset parents, as you totally understand. The parents are now just waiting patiently, and I have to say they're being fantastic. The parents are, considering what their concerns would be about their children.
And have you gauged, John? Have you gauged an attitude, or at least an approach from the people undertaking, or doing the decontamination? Do they look concerned, or are they just at their job and going through their motions?
Yep, no, they're doing their job. So they've got people in hazmat suits, the plastic ones, and they're going through with the children to keep the children calm, because it's be an unnerving experience because there's very little kids amongst this primary school children. So there's even some little kids from the kindy age group that were on the school. Everybody was on the school at the time when they shut it down had to stay on the site. So there were parents coming in with their own little children to pick up their slightly older children. So yeah, they've been captured in this.
Now we're talking not just about the South End school, John, but also there's a Montessori school that shares the same area. They've been affected as well.
Yes, it has. Yep. No, they're all in the same situation.
And what do we know about the people that were taken to hospital? Have you heard any more about their condition, or did you see what condition they were in when they left?
No, I don't know about their condition. All I've been told is that they were the ones that had vomited and were feeling unwell. So as a precaution, because they showed the more symptoms, they showed those symptoms, they decided to take them up to Masterton Hospital to be further assessed.
Right. What are you thinking about the cause? You mentioned a plane earlier. I'm guessing you're referring to a top dresser that might have been spraying fields near the school?
No, I don't think it's that. There was, people have commented it could have been people in the school thought they heard the noise of a plane going overhead. None of that's confirmed, so I can't really comment on that because I don't know. So yeah.
Sure, could be anything at this stage. I imagine there'll be an investigation. Also, police and ambulance are recommending if anyone there from the school or the area is feeling sick to check in to the local hospital. That's Masterton Hospital. You're hearing that message as well?
Yes, I haven't heard of anybody, but yes, that message has been put out. So yeah, it's a waiting game at the moment, especially for the parents waiting for their children to go through the decontamination, and that we're hoping to move the parents into a warmer area shortly because it's bitterly cold here at the moment with a cold southerly wind. So yeah.
Yeah, good on you, John. Good work, and thanks for the updates. Thanks for making time for us while you're there, helping to manage the situation. John Booth, the Mayor of Carterton there, where, well, maybe 7, maybe 10 people, very young children have been taken to hospital after vomiting. Some of them quite violently, sounding very sick after they noticed a pungent sulphur-like smell at the school. Many more of them currently going through a decontamination process 2 at a time. It's just about 6:13. More than 7,000 new houses will be built in Auckland's northwest thanks to a $339 million interest-free government loan to Auckland Council. The loan's a show of cooperation between the government and the council towards addressing the city's housing crisis. But one critic says it's just a pimple on a pumpkin and much, much more help is needed. Matthew Chinnison reports.
Auckland needs about 45,000 homes right now to meet the city's housing needs. The new houses announced will be built on the semi-rural sections in Red Hills and Whenuapai, close to the Westgate Commercial Centre, a short drive to the Northwestern Motorway and the planned light rail line. Phil Goff says that's perfect for housing.
We're at an area here which is close to major transport networks. Somebody says we're going to have rapid transit through here reasonably soon as well, which I think will help. Close to amenities like Westgate and close to the beautiful environmental areas of the north and the west.
The loan is part of the government's $1 billion housing infrastructure fund, and the money will be used to create new roads, stormwater and sewage systems, and bus and cycleways. Mr. Goff says it shows the government-council partnership is having an impact.
I think that we're starting to see some real inroads now into the housing crisis that we've had.
Mr. Twyford says difficulty funding infrastructure has been one of the major roadblocks to building more houses in Auckland.
Government will be doing everything it can to pull every lever available to it to increase the supply of housing and build the kinds of houses we need at the prices people can afford in the places where they want to live.
Auckland Chamber of Commerce Chief Executive Michael Barnett says while it's good to see the money, a whole lot more is needed to make meaningful difference.
Biggest concern is what is it going to do? Is it going to do enough when we're billions of dollars short of money for infrastructure and you get $300 million? It is only a pimple on a pumpkin.
But on the upside, Mr. Barnett says it's good to see the infrastructure being sorted before the houses go in. Infrastructure New Zealand's Chief Executive Stephen Selwood says any new houses in Auckland are a plus, but he'd like to see the developments concentrated in South Auckland to link up with existing rail and motorway networks.
I would say it helps at the margins, but when you're already 50,000 houses behind, we should be building 15,000 homes a year now to keep up with demand.
The building company Universal Homes will be constructing about 1,200 of the homes on the Red Hills site. Homeowners will pay between $650,000 and $890,000, a lot less than the city's average price of more than $1 million. Universal's Chief Executive Graham Street says construction is already underway.
In this development, we're looking at a cost range of somewhere between $650,000 and the high eights. The first houses are under construction as of today. We hope to have those completed with settlements, the first settlements happening in the first quarter, the early second quarter of next year.
This is the 9th loan from the government's Housing Infrastructure Fund, with one more still to come. I Tamaki Makoto, more Checkpoint, ko Matthew Tunis and Tēnei.
It's 16 minutes past 6. Christchurch police are knocking on the doors of known drug dealers in an effort to get a dangerous batch of synthetic drugs off the streets. 10 people have been taken to Christchurch Hospital in the past 48 hours after smoking the drug and suffering seizures and in some cases heart attacks. 3 are in intensive care. It's believed that they've been taking either AB or AMB Fubinaka, which has been linked to numerous deaths in the North Island. Detective Inspector Greg Merton told Christchurch reporter Conan Young police are visiting dealers around the city.
We've always seen synthetics as a major problem because it's so targeted at youth and accessible to youth and so unknown in terms of what's in it. So that's been a constant area of our targeting, particularly with the offender prevention team, who a major part of their focus is on targeting synthetic dealers because of the dangers they pose.
But with the 10 cases in the space of 48 hours, 3 people in intensive care, are you knocking on those doors as we speak, or?
Every week we're knocking on those doors.
But at the moment?
Yes, we are.
Right.
I can't comment in terms of the supplier of those 8 to 10 people. That's obviously a lot of work that goes into identifying the source of all their drugs, who's supplying them, and obviously they have to cooperate with who's supplying them with the drugs, which often they're reluctant to do. And then we go and work up that job and go and take care of them.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because obviously, it's a crime and you need to follow your processes, but it's a public health issue as well, isn't it?
That's the major thing. In terms of the end users, it's a public health issue, and it's trying to educate people that taking synthetic drugs, you're actually playing Russian roulette with your own life.
It's 18 minutes past 6. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says she weighed up carefully the value to New Zealand of her appearance coming up on American television shows while in New York for the UN General Assembly. That's next week. As Checkpoint revealed earlier this week, Ms Ardern will be appearing on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, along with the Today Show, as well as an appearance on CNN. In between keynote speeches and meetings with other world leaders at the summit, she will also meet with United Nations Women Goodwill Ambassador, actress Anne Hathaway. Jacinda Ardern will be accompanied on her trip by her partner Clark Gayford and their 3-year-old daughter Neve. She talked to our Deputy Political Editor Chris Bramwell ahead of her flight tomorrow.
So your trip has a mix of UN and some quite high-level keynote speeches, but then on the side you're also doing some American media interviews like the Today Show, The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. How are you going to balance up the kind of serious side of the trip to the celebrity side, and what's the benefit to New Zealand really of you doing those appearances?
And that's been a primary question for me. What is the benefit? That's the lens I've applied. Is there value in taking the time in the program to take part in a couple of events like that? We've kept it pretty small, kept it to 3, but with those 3, I think there's a combined audience there of 7 million people, and so I see that as an opportunity for at least one of the interviews to talk about New Zealand's values and our focus at the General Assembly. For the others, it's a chance to promote New Zealand. Of course, I hope that there is some value add on the international stage by talking about our home, and whether or not, as a result we see an uplift in the people who are likely to visit, then that's an added bonus.
Don't you think, though, that shows like the Today Show will want to talk less about the New Zealand and more about you as a mother, a new mother running a country?
Oh, I'm pretty good at changing the topic quite quickly. And look, I accept that there's some interest as a result of my change in role. We did have quite a few media inquiries, and we've only kept the number that we're doing quite limited. And again, trying to make sure I focus on actually just capitalising on that opportunity for New Zealand.
You are taking Neve with you, and I know that in New Zealand you've made a real effort to keep her out of the public eye, and I think New Zealanders respect that, but will that be more difficult in the United States with a lot of interest?
Yeah, very much the amount of exposure she'll have will very much depend on just the routine when we get over there. She'll primarily be with Clark during the trip, but I hope that the same courtesy that's being paid to us by the New Zealand media, hopefully we might be paid to us by others.
You've got a bilat as such with Anne Hathaway, and there's a lot of interest around paid parental leave and that kind of thing. What kind of messages will you be giving in that area?
I'm going to use it as an opportunity not just to talk about the extension to paid parental leave that we've brought in here in New Zealand, but also some of the other initiatives like our Best Start package for the first year of a baby's life, our Families package, what we've done around early childhood education in New Zealand. I think the focus that we have on children in their earliest years is really critical, and there's even more we want to do in that space. Our child poverty work, our wellbeing strategy, we've got a good story to tell, so no doubt we'll have a good conversation, I think, about all of those initiatives.
That's Jacinda Ardern talking there to our Deputy Political Editor Chris Bramwell at 22 minutes past 6. The stories of those buried in the Jewish section of Auckland's oldest cemetery are coming to life, thanks to the work of a Hebrew reading student. Richard Myberg has been meticulously translating and documenting Hebrew inscriptions on more than 80 headstones in the Simon Street Cemetery for 2 months, simply because they don't exist. Old records containing the translations were destroyed back in the 1940s, along with what was known about those buried there. Our reporter Annika Smith went to the Simon Street Cemetery to pay Mr Myberg a visit.
Nestled in the heart of central Auckland, you'll find the city's oldest cemetery, consecrated in 1842. The burial ground sprawls either side of the Simon Street thoroughfare and has 1,200 graves, 80 of which have inscriptions in both English and Hebrew.
So if you look at the inscription, it's super simple. The Pate and the Nun, P and an N in Hebrew, that's an abbreviation for Po Nikbar, which just means here lies. So it's basically the start of every single one of these headstones.
Richard Myberg first started transcribing the Jewish headstones after realising other anthropology students were bypassing studying them because they couldn't find translations. The 21-year-old Auckland University student, who can read Hebrew, says he simply saw a need.
I like being here when I'm reading them and writing them because there's something about the space that I think really lends itself to just sort of the weight of it and the gravity of it. But some of that's just not possible. It's too worn away or weathered, and it's just illegible. So I come at night and I look super creepy with my camera and my flashes, get real nice harsh oblique lighting, take the photos home. You have to run them through Photoshop still and try and get what I can out of it. It's a long and pretty boring process, honestly, just trying to pick all the little details out of it.
Linda Lucas from the Auckland Council says the 80-odd headstones have been transcribed before.
A lot of the information about Simon Street was lost in a fire in a building, I think in the 1940s. And so over the last few years, the Friends of Simon Street and Auckland Council have been putting together information about the cemetery, and we've gathered English transcriptions, but we've never had the Hebrew transcriptions.
Gary Lambert, a retired detective who worked in the Auckland CIB for nearly 40 years, knows more than most about the historic site. A family tree project 18 years ago has morphed into a passion for discovering and archiving the cemetery's stories. And when the amateur historian heard what Richard Myberg was doing, he couldn't wait to meet him.
I've researched the families as far as I can that are buried in here, but the Hebrew has always remained a bit of a mystery as to what exactly it said, whether it was a translation of the English or whether it was something different.
At least 20 headstones were damaged and defaced in 2012, some spray painted with swastikas. Mr. Myberg hopes his transcriptions will help people better understand the Jewish community.
Jews occupy a really interesting and weird space in New Zealand with such a low population, but at the same time this is smack dab in the middle of the city and it's very public and visible. And I think because there are so few Jewish people in New Zealand, there's a lot of mischaracterization and misrepresentation that's just born out of like not really knowing. I think that's probably the main source of all the vandalism, is just that people don't really know what Jews are in a weird way. So I think having just the very mundane day-to-day information about the lives and deaths of ordinary Kiwi people in such a public setting, I just think that's really important.
The Auckland Council plans to add Richard's transcriptions to its website, so while the headstones won't last forever, the tributes to those buried there will. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Annika Smith aho.
Thanks, Annika. More brilliant reporting there from Annika Smith, as well as our cameraman Nick Monroe. Also worth a watch back on our website, rnz.co.nz, or our Facebook page to catch up on later on. It's 26.5 minutes past 6, so to finish tonight, pipe band membership has been in decline, with some bands folding or amalgamating due to a lack of new blood. But one young Australian man is hoping to change that. 29-year-old Tom Freeman, yes, 29 is young, picked up the bagpipes just over 2 years ago. His obsession with perfecting his skills has won him some fans as well as some enemies in a sleepy neighbourhood in Port Macquarie on the New South Wales mid-north coast. Among them is ABC reporter Carla Mascarenhas.
2 years ago, Tom Freeman picked up the bagpipes.
I found myself over the few years prior starting to watch some bagpipe videos on YouTube, and I'd sit there with a goofy grin, get some tingles down my spine, like physiological responses to the music. I was thinking, wow, this is pretty powerful stuff.
Powerful and pretty irritating, according to his housemate, Ashan Normoyle.
Tom's routine on the bagpipe is relentless, so he'll play it at, say, 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and then maybe midday, and then in the afternoon, and then in the evening again. It is like, I could say, living hell, if I know what hell is like. Very torturous at times. Testing of the relationship makes you want to move out at times, and you just want to scream and pull your hair out.
And it's not just Tom's housemates bearing the brunt of his passion. Tom is now a well-known figure at the local Port Macquarie Lighthouse, outside the supermarkets and in my street.
I find it really annoying to hear it when I'm trying to have my afternoon nap.
Yeah. Well, out of, say, in the neighbourhood, how many people would be having an afternoon nap?
Well, I don't think that's the point.
But not all his neighbours are as tough as me. Jodie Mulhern says she's adjusted to his hobby, even growing to like it, gradually.
To begin with, Tom used to play one note over and over again on a Sunday afternoon, and that was a bit grating, if I'm honest. But look, he's come a long way, and it's been quite the privilege to see him grow as a musician, and I think he's brought a fair bit of charm to our neighbourhood as well.
I've had mixed responses. For example, I was busking in a town in front of a Coles supermarket, and a man just walked over and verbally accosted me. But on the other hand, I was playing Amazing Grace while I was learning it, and a man walked up to me who'd come from a funeral, and he said, "Thanks, that means so much to me."
At 29, Tom is the youngest piper of the Hastings District Highland Pipe Band, The average age is 60. The president of Pipe Band Australia, Chris Earle, says that's a situation mirrored across regional Australia.
Many parts have an ageing population, and that has created a lot of challenges for pipe bands in regional communities to be engaging. Unfortunately, some of our bands have not been as sustainable, and some have therefore either gone into recess, amalgamated with nearby bands, or in fact disbanded.
The association says it's lost 30 bands over the past 25 years and over 1,000 members, the overwhelming majority in regional areas. But Tom is both persistent and patient and believes if people give it a chance, they'll learn to love the bagpipes as much as he does.
I'm just a guy having a crack. If I can get one kid to play the bagpipes, I'd be fine with that.
That's bagpiper Tom Freeman ending that report from the ABC. Good news to finish with out of Masterton, with all those children taken to hospital, not serious, and they will be sent home tonight. So great news to finish off with. That's all for us this week. We'll be back next week. Ka kite ao.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Carterton's Mayor John Booth says some of the children being decontaminated after a mystery substance was dropped from the air near the town's South End school today are very young and vulnerable. Housing New Zealand's chief executive can't say how many people may miss out on compensation after being evicted from state houses thought to be meth contaminated. Police in Christchurch say they're contacting drug dealers to try to get a dodgy batch of synthetic cannabis off the streets, but they won't say whether they're known the source of supply. The Associate Education Minister, Tracy Martin, unveils a draft action plan to make schools more inclusive for children with additional learning needs and disabilities. Our next news and weather is at 7.
On Country Life this week, we're in the far north, visiting a small settlement that hosts a Wild West event.
High noon, Hokianga time, we have a shoot